Audio check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. Check, check.
Good morning. Subcommittee will come to order. I want to welcome our witnesses to discuss the program integrity tool and the other important systems that VA uses to manage community care payments. The program integrity tool consolidates all community care claims payment data into one place. The Veterans Health Administration uses it to do two important things. First, to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse when paying community care providers' claims. Second, to bill and collect for non-service-connected care. When care is not service-connected, VHA is responsible for billing the veterans' insurance companies, or in some instances, the veterans for copays. These medical collections, over 90% which are insurance company billings, are an important part of the budget that pays for care for other veterans. Without PIT, VA is essentially operating an open cash register. There's no controls on the cash coming out of the register, and the cashier isn't collecting the change and putting it back in. That was essentially the situation beginning in February of 2023 when the technical defects in PIT became overwhelmingly and VA had to turn the system off. To some degree, that's still the situation. The Office of Inspector General estimated that $665 million in revenue was not collected, most of which is owed by these insurance companies. And millions of dollars of fraud, waste, and abuse went undetected. VA struggled to get PIT working again until July of this year, and it's still not clear whether all the problems can be resolved. This has been an 18-month struggle marked by unsteady leadership, questionable decision-making, and terrible contractor performance. And the department has not been eager to answer many questions on this. Chairman Boss sent Secretary McDonald a letter on July 30th asking a dozen detailed questions only to receive a curt response on September the 6th from Mr. Del Bene dismissing all the questions because a meeting with the committee staff had taken place. We still need answers. Congress has the constitutional prerogative and the duty to ask the executive branch questions. I would like a commitment from VA to respond in full in writing to whatever we are unable to cover today. We need to determine how exactly the cash register opened and whether it is truly closed. This is even more important given the $12 billion VHA budget shortfall that you're reporting for next year. Only yesterday did VA give us an arithmetic showing that $12 billion consists of. We still have a lot of questions how the numbers were developed, and the committee staff is expecting a meeting with VA about that next week. VA has told us that community care is part of the shortfall, but we have received conflicting information about whether delayed medical collections are a part of it. We're slowly getting closer to a complete explanation of the healthcare shortfall. In particular, the improper payments in community care and billings that VA failed to capture deserve extra scrutiny. Community care is a $31 billion program, and the improper payment rate is 4.9%. Not all of that is waste or fraud. About a third of that is compliance issues, not affecting the payment amounts. But altogether, the improper payments work out to be about $1.5 billion annually. And the miscollections add up to nearly $1 billion over 18 months. Again, these are dollars that insurance companies owe the VA, which could be used to deliver services and benefits to our veterans. Instead, it's improving the insurance company's bottom line and benefiting their stockholders. As we have said time and time again in this subcommittee, IT system failures are no excuse to waste taxpayers' money. I have no doubt that Congress will get to the bottom of the healthcare shortfall and prevent veterans' care from being undermined. But VA's leaders need to understand they cannot incite a panic and pressure Congress to bail them out for their mistakes. Today, our responsibility is to untangle the web surrounding PIT and understand the true impacts on the budget. With that, I will yield to Ranking Member Shurflis McCormick for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Today, our focus is the Program Integrity Tool, or the PIT. This key tool serves as a main processor of community care billing data, which is used to bill private insurance and veterans for non-service connected care, to detect duplicative payments and aid in fraud, waste, and abuse detection. In February of 2023, the PIT's operations were paused after defective code, duplicate claims, and inaccurate data were identified and relayed to management offices. Over 18 months later, VA has not resumed full operation of this tool. While I'm glad to hear that the PIT has resumed revenue operations, billing functions, I remain concerned about the weight that is backlogged will have on both the VA employees and our veteran patients. Excuse me. In its July 16, 2024 Management Advisory Memo, the Inspector General estimated that the PIT pause affected approximately 40 million paid claims, totaling around 665.5 million that may have otherwise supported veterans' care. Additionally, during the PIT's pause, revenue operations have been unable to bill veterans for co-pays they may have incurred while receiving care in the community. VHA has reported that in some cases, veterans may be billed for care that is over a year old. While these veterans, at some point, should have been aware of these impending bills, it is unreasonable to expect veterans to choose between paying a year delayed bill or navigating the system to secure a debt waiver. I'm concerned about veterans, many of whom are on a fixed income, receiving a massive debt due to another VA IT system failure. We cannot allow VA's struggling IT infrastructure to cause financial stress to our veterans. VA has not yet quantified how many veterans will be impacted by these delayed bills or to what extent. I urge VA to fully assess the impact that this pause has had on our veterans before beginning co-pay collections. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Shurflis McCormick. I will now introduce the witnesses on our first and only panel. First, from the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology and Chief Information Officer, Mr. Kurt Delbenny. We also have Ms. Sherry Waters, Executive Director of the Health Portfolio in the Office of Information and Technology. From the Veterans Health Administration, we have Ms. Laura Duke, Chief Financial Officer, and Ms. Tracy Davis Bradley, the Chief Integrity and Compliance Officer. Finally, from the VA Office of Inspector General, we have Ms. Jennifer McDonald, Director of the Community Care Division. I ask the witnesses to please stand and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and let the record reflect that all witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Mr. Delbenny, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of the VA.
Good morning, Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Shurflis McCormick, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Office of Information Technology's efforts to rebuild the Program Integrity Tool. I'm accompanied by Ms. Sherry Waters, the OIT Executive Director of Health Portfolio, Software Program Management, and my colleagues from Veterans Health Administration, Ms. Laura Duke, the Chief Financial Officer of VHA, and Dr. Tracy Davis Bradley, Executive Director, Office of Integrity and Compliance. VA's Program Integrity Tool serves as a centralized repository for community care billing data used for detecting fraud, waste, and abuse, as well as third-party billing. Originally designed to identify duplicate payments, the tool's uses and sources expanded over time to meet a wider variety of needs. In December 2022, as part of the PIT's realignment under VHA's Division of Program Integrity in the Office of Integrity and Compliance, VA identified the need to significantly enhance staffing and resource support for this critical tool. Due diligence completed by OIC in partnership with OIT in early 2023 led to the detection of issues with the database code logic that resulted in data inaccuracies. Upon discovery of these issues, VA took immediate action to pause PIT operations in February of 2023. We promptly notified Congress and the Office of the Inspector General of the need for this pause and the underlying reasons. Since pausing PIT operations, we have made significant strides in addressing the identified issues. We implemented more rigorous oversight and expanded our team to support our rebuild efforts. We're happy to report that Revenue Operations has resumed functionality and is steadily processing the backlog of data. We expect the full backlog to be completed in Revenue Operations' hands by the end of fiscal year 2025. Despite these challenges, Revenue Operations collected $171.6 million in third-party community care collections during July and August of 2024 since receiving the data backlog. The PIT pause allowed Revenue Operations to catch up on normal backlog, achieving their collections target of 100.7% for fiscal year 24. I'd also like to address OIG's estimate of the $665 million in delayed community care revenue. While this figure is significant, it's important to emphasize that this revenue will ultimately be collected and does not represent a permanent loss. As my colleague Ms. Duke can attest, this amount is not a significant source of overall VA revenue. As for fraud, waste, and abuse efforts while the PIT was offline, OIC has used alternative methods to detect and report suspicious transactions. OIC leveraged upstream systems and other data sources to identify and prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. Moving forward, VHA and OIT are working in lockstep to improve collaboration as we design modern and efficient workflows for revenue operations and for fraud, waste, and abuse detection. We remain committed to full recovery of the PIT and will continue to provide this subcommittee with updates on its progress. Our dedication to rebuilding the PIT and strengthening its capabilities demonstrates our commitment to upholding integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness within the VA. As the rebuild efforts show, we will continue prioritizing critical systems, developing proactive roadmaps for those systems, strengthening technical expertise, and fostering contractor accountability to safeguard the long-term health of essential IT systems like the PIT. Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony today. I appreciate your commitment to addressing the pressing challenges we face in our digital transformation efforts. I recognize that our continued collaboration to prioritize and overcome these challenges enhances the care and benefits we provide to veterans, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Del Bene. The written statement of Mr. Del Bene will be entered into the hearing record. Ms. McDonald, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of OIG.
Good morning, Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on OIG's oversight of VHA's pause of its program integrity tool. In February 2023, VHA collaborated with OIT to pause the tool after becoming aware of ongoing issues with errors in coding and unreliable data. The tool is a consolidated data repository that is critical to VHA's efforts to collect co-payments from veterans and reimbursements from private health insurers for non-service connected paid community care claims. It is also used for VA's fraud, waste, and abuse detection and mitigation efforts for community care claims. The pause was intended to give VHA time to evaluate the tool's processes, data, documentation, and its underlying IT system. It was also meant to determine the causes of any data errors and identify improvement opportunities. Since at least 2022, VHA entities were aware of data accuracy and integrity concerns, such as claims entered inaccurately and duplicate claims. In July of this year, we issued a management advisory memorandum discussing the major impacts of the tool's pause on both revenue collection and on the detection of fraud, waste, and abuse for paid community care claims. We found collections of veterans' co-payments were approximately $23 million lower for the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 2024 than for the same period in fiscal year 2023. Once the tool is fully functional, VHA will have to work through the backlog of paid claims to bill veterans for co-payments. This could negatively affect veterans because they may receive bills for care that is over 18 months old. In May 2024, VHA told us they are working with the Office of General Counsel to implement a regulatory change to allow for debt waivers for these veterans. We estimated that the pause resulted in over $665 million in collections from private insurers that had not been recovered between February 1st, 2023 and February 1st, 2024. Further, the financial impact will continue to accumulate at an estimated $55.5 million per month in potential lost revenue from private insurers until VHA resumes collection activities. We also estimated that VHA will have to review a backlog of approximately 40 million paid claims to determine if they are billable for co-payments for veterans or for private insurers for revenue collection. In August 2024, VHA officials stated that data from the tool were available to process community care claims for reimbursement. However, we have not yet confirmed this independently. Given our prior oversight, the OIG has concerns about VHA's ability to work through the claims backlog in a timely manner. In a 2022 OIG audit to determine how effectively VHA billed private insurers, we found that VHA had not established an efficient process to ensure private insurers were billed within timelines. The audit found VA's billing and revenue collection processes were not aligned with insurers' timely filing deadlines, complete claims information was not always available, and workload and staffing challenges delayed the billing of private insurers. We made 3 recommendations to VHA that remain open until the tool is fully operational and we can assess implementation. The pause has also impeded VA's oversight efforts to help identify fraud, waste, and abuse. For example, the tool currently cannot apply real-time views of provider behavior patterns across community care programs. The OIG recognizes that VHA is deciding whether to bring the oversight function of the tool back online or to replace it. We suggested VHA consider the following actions. First, ensure there are sufficient resources and processes to promptly bill the backlog of community care claims. Second, establish processes to prevent further disruption of revenue collections. Finally, provide adequate resources to perform fraud, waste, and abuse examinations of the data on the backlog of community care claims. In conclusion, the pause of the program integrity tool delayed VHA's ability to collect hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue and has impacted VHA's fiscal stewardship efforts. We urge VHA to take all necessary actions to ensure the tool's full functionalities are restored. Given the effects on veterans being billed for services provided as long as 18 months ago and delayed revenue collections from private insurers, we will continue to monitor VHA's actions and keep the committee informed. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. The written statement of Ms. McDonald will be entered into the hearing record. We are now going to proceed with the questioning, and I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Duke, let's go over the basics. What does the Veterans Health Administration bill insurance companies for community care? Why does the Veterans Health Administration bill insurance companies for community care, and what role does the Program Integrity Tool, the PIT, play in that?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for the question. The role of the billing is, from a billing perspective, we are source neutral regarding whether the care is provided in the community or in the direct care system. And so we need to bill first and third party for eligible veterans regardless of where the care is delivered. The PIT tool was the data repository that gave us a lens on all of the care that was provided in the community that has been reimbursed through a variety of different programs as the program has grown in increments over the years.
Okay. Please explain what happened to the community care billing data while PIT was offline.
So that data was available in the source systems that actually complete the billing activity to ensure that we're paying the third-party providers, but we didn't necessarily have the adequate data about what was delivered to enable our team to determine the veterans' first and third-party responsibilities. That data was still available, it was just not in a form that we could take into our systems. Since July, that data has become available. They have begun pushing that data available to us, and we have begun working through it at a very fast clip. It is a lot of data, but we are utilizing all tools that are available to us to work through it quickly, and we've already seen our collections increase, as Mr. Delbene was referring to in his statement.
Sure. And believe me, we're going to get into that a little bit later because there's a huge difference between collecting 100.7% of what you anticipated to collect as opposed to collecting 100.7% of what is actually obligated to you. Large void there. Dr. Bradley, how does the VHA use PIT to prevent improper payments, including fraud and waste?
The program integrity tool helps to identify issues in a pre-payment setting, so to prevent bad payments from exiting VA. We also use it for post-payment analytics to understand trends and potential fraudulent, wasteful, or abusive billing.
Dr. Bradley, the improper payments, how many are overpayments, duplicate payments, or payments that otherwise are incorrect versus procedural compliance issues, which doesn't really cause a financial change?
So we have to do a lot of analytics to identify, to kind of extrapolate what percentages. I can tell you that only $22 million per year on average is duplicate payments. We, though, are in partnership with OIG, HHS, CMS, do identify schemes, trends related to fraud, waste, abuse, to make sure that we understand the various percentages across the healthcare sector.
Okay, if you could get for us, okay, the difference between how much of it is fraud, waste, and abuse, and actually there's a financial obligation, if you will, that's paid or due to be paid, and how much of it is just like an administrative or, again, some kind of a compliance issue, so that we can see the difference in that. Dr. Bradley, what are the advantages in having the community care claims data all in one place to identify duplicate or incorrect payments?
Well, what's great about having it all in one place, we're able to identify not only duplicate payments across payment systems, we're also able to look at specific providers across all systems to identify their total amount of kind of exposure that they provide to VA. So that's the picture that it gives us.
Okay, and when was the last time your office or anyone else was able to use data from PIT to scan for fraud and waste?
The last time we were able to do that was when the program integrity tool was up and running, but we have been scanning for fraud, waste, and abuse in the upstream payment system. So we have continued to do those same analytics. They've been more manual and labor intensive, but we've still been able to do them over the past year and a half.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will now yield to Ranking Member Surfless McCormick for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. I want to start off by really zoning in and focusing on the impact of the pause on our veterans. OIG's advisory memorandum noted that in some cases, veterans' outstanding co-pays may date back to care that is over a year old, but did not quantify the impact that these delayed bills may have had on our veterans. Does the VA have a data on the number and amount of co-pays that are outstanding due to the program integrity tool pause?
So while we don't yet have an estimate because we're still waiting for the data that we didn't have access to during the PIT pause, I can tell you that historically, first-party collections for community care are a very small portion of what we collect. In '22, it was $31 million, and in '23, it was $40 million. So it's a small amount, and I want to emphasize that this is only certain veterans, those who are service-connected or eligible for VA care on the basis of income are exempt from co-payments, as well as certain other categories of veterans.
Well, I understand that the number amount might seem small, but with our veterans who actually have to do the co-pays, we're trying to understand the impact on them. So will we be able to get that data? Do you have any plans for the future to actually collect the data to find out how it's going to impact individual?
As we process and determine what individual veterans owe, we work very closely with the veterans in question to make them aware of their rights and work with them on what is necessary. The other thing I'll mention is that as we bill first party, we also are going to bill the third party, and to the extent that those veterans have private insurance that we're able to collect from, that can mitigate or eliminate the veteran's first party responsibility as well. And so we would always make that available, even if the collection from the insurance company comes years later, we would issue that refund to the veteran upon collection.
So will we be able to get that data?
As we process through the data that comes through PIT, we will keep you posted on the average debt that veterans owe. Yes.
Thank you. Why are we even discussing collecting these co-payments before VA understands the impact that this will have on our veterans?
So legally, we are limited in what we can offer veterans in terms of relief. We do maximize the utilization of what we have available legally. We try to make it as easy a process. We work closely with the Debt Management Center and use the authorities that you've provided to the Secretary. As we have seen delayed payments incurring greater responsibility on our veterans, we have begun exploring whether there's a regulatory fix that would make us able to proactively extend relief to veterans in a way that currently legally we are not able to do. And we are exploring that right now in coordination with our general counsel.
Much like the pharmacy copay issue, VA has been dealing with since the first go-live, the Electronic Health Records Modernization Project. I'm worried about veterans receiving massive bills for care that was provided over a year and a half ago. Has VA given any thought to waiving this debt?
As I said, we explored what was feasible within our authorities and determined that we needed additional regulatory authority to be able to waive the debt as proactively as we would like. That said, we offer veterans many opportunities to work with us individually, particularly reaching out to the small population who have particularly large debt that they've accrued over time.
I remain extremely concerned that VA is moving forward with charging those veterans without understanding the full impact of these bills. I understand the VA's desire to collect on these bills after such a lengthy pause, but we must keep in mind how this could impact the veterans, many of whom are on a fixed income. So I just want to stress again that I want to make sure that we're actually taking the steps to protect our veterans and understanding their position and putting them first, and making sure that an unexpected bill of any amount may impact the veteran's budget for the month. Sometimes we should not take one just because we have neglected our IT system. And I don't want that burden to fall onto our veterans, especially since there might be more bills that are compounding on them as we're going through our IT modernization. I yield back.
Thank you very much. I will now recognize Representative Mace for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Program Integrity Tool, or PIT system, was shut down for approximately 18 months while the VA struggled to find its way to a partial solution. And this only happened after this committee got involved. At a minimum, taxpayers deserve an explanation for what happened and why the VA took so long to get all of this sorted out. So my first question today is for you, Mr. Del Bene. How much did the PIT cost to develop and then operate for 10 years?
Thank you for the question. I don't know that I have the 10-year number. Our annual budget was around $5 million for the PIT.
Okay. Also, for the first 5 months of the shutdown, the contractor was making server, operating system, and database upgrades to PIT. Were these successful?
They were.
You testified that you raised issues with the contractor's quality of work, resulting in new contractor leadership and a larger team. Did you terminate the contract or simply let it expire?
We did not terminate the contract. I made a judgment decision that it was better to get them working on the problem with a larger team, with a commitment to the CEO of SAIC, and that's the direction we took.
Okay.
That's what resulted in us being able to effectively bring it back online. I would also say, without in any way minimizing the work that they did that caused these problems, they were very diligent in helping us fix the problems once this was raised to their attention.
You removed the senior executive in charge of the project because he or she was not, quote, engaged enough. What does that mean?
I believe that no matter how large your portfolio of systems is, you should understand each of them intimately so that you understand when things are off the rails. And I didn't believe that this executive had that mindset. And so we moved him to another position. He's subsequently left the VA.
Okay. So no one was fired or anything like that?
He was removed from his position.
Okay. And when did this happen?
I'll have to get back to you on the precise date, but it was part of this reset process that caused that.
Okay. And then when did you personally get involved with trying to fixing the PIT?
I got involved, I believe it was probably March or April. I can get back to you on a specific date. I will say since I learned of it, I have met weekly with the team.
Do you know roughly when that was?
I'm sorry?
Do you know roughly?
In the spring, and I can give you
Spring
the
of this
exact
year?
date. Yeah, this executive alerted me to it, and I said, I've got to dig deep
Why
into
not
that right
sooner,
away.
I guess? You just found out about it in the springtime?
That's the first I heard about it. I dug
Okay.
in the minute I heard about it.
Okay. Do you take any responsibility for this mess?
I do. I think that anything that's under my watch is my responsibility.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back. Appreciate it.
I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Del Bene, first question on page 3 of your written testimony. Apparently last month, you have a new contractor that is working on will support the development and sustainment of the pit moving forward. Please assure me that this subcontractor or this contractor is not attached to Microsoft.
This contractor is in no way attached to Microsoft.
Thank you. I will tell you, Mr. Del Bene, we now have, this is the 4th major significant action, well, no, it's at least the 4th, and I can think of a couple more, that tend to uncover over time. We have the critical skills incentive issue, we've got the $15 billion, we've got the sexual harassment scandal, we've got the ongoing electronic records, now we've got this issue. I would just ask, in a rhetorical question, how many more of these issues do we have to come out from the leadership of VA? But I will also tell you, they all hurt veterans, because the impact of each of these major significant issues filter down to the treatment that our veterans get or don't get, or payment that they get or don't get. So I'm almost, to use a World War I term, shell-shocked over the numbers of issues that are coming out of the leadership of the Veterans Administration. Dr. Bradley, I understand that you believe that upstream controls are more effective in preventing waste, fraud, and abuse. Do you have any figures to back up that belief?
So in general, it's much more effective to prevent a bad payment from leaving the door than kind of a pay and chase model. So it's in general that you want to be able to identify, for example, an upstream issue where the location of service doesn't match a procedure code. Like, you can't have a surgery at home. These are all controls that if we can prevent the payment and not have to discover it after the payment's been made, we've never spent the money.
Okay, I'm less concerned about, I understand, and that's reasonable. I would be more concerned with having to claw money back from our veterans, because that's where they get hurt. So I've heard Miss McDonald, Dr. McDonald, excuse me, you testified that you, and I think, and it was not in your written testimony that I could find, you testified that part of the problems were incorrectly entered data. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct.
And yet, the information that we were given was it was defective logic code. Now, that's two different issues. So which is it?
So we can only speak on what we heard when we were working on the MAM from VHA officials. I think they could probably give you more information on the details of what all of the errors were. It's our understanding that beyond the initial issues that were discovered, the 3 types of issues with the program integrity tool, there were 18 issues identified once they took the PIT offline and then did a deeper dive into what was going on with the data accuracy and integrity issues.
Okay, great point. So what was first alerted, logic code or improperly entered data? Because that's either a human error or a code error.
I think VA would have to address what they first identified in terms of our knowledge of it. We first became aware that there might be issues with the program integrity tool data when our investigators were using data from the program integrity tool and data from the third-party administrators for the community care network data claims to look at investigations for a specific provider, and the data wasn't matching. So they were unsure which source data was inaccurate and why it wasn't matching, so started to have conversations with OIC and VHA about that.
Okay, I think Mr. Del Bene wants to address that.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. The process that the PIT utilizes is something called ETL, with extract, transform, and load, which means that the logic code actually results in data errors once the ETL has occurred. So they're really two sides of exactly the same thing. We ended up with issues which were around the logic code in the ETL process resulted in data that was improper or incorrect within the database. We also ended up in situations where a particular file could go through the ETL process twice and cause an ingestion of data in a second time, so you'd get duplicates. So they are related to one another.
Okay, so have you considered, and I've got a very short period of time here, the intelligence community can help you with this. Have you considered consolidating the multiple databases, I think you're calling them, that all feed into the PIT?
We have not considered that. I think it would cause a greater dependency on a single system and complexity to actually try to bring those together at this point in time. What we are investigating is whether we can streamline the entire pipeline from those sources all the way to revenue operations. Things go into the PIT, then they go into a corporate data warehouse before they get picked up for transaction by revenue operations. We're looking at holistically of how we can improve and modernize the system to get rid of those complexities.
Okay, thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Representative. Dr. McDonald, as you stated in your remarks and according to your report, how many community care claims did VA pay out during the first 13 months of the PIT shutdown, and how much money does that represent?
So VA paid about 40 million claims in the first 12 months, and that represented about $28.6 billion. That was from February 1st, 23 to February 1st, 24.
Okay, thank you. Dr. McDonald, you didn't estimate how much waste or fraud there was in those payments during the 13-month period, but the improper payment rate for community care is 4.9%, and 0.1% is worth $28.6 million. Is it fair to say the improper payments were probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars?
We didn't calculate an estimate for fraud, waste, and abuse or improper payments. Our estimates were focused on the revenue collection side, so I can't speak to that amount.
Okay. Ms. Duke, according to the OIG's report, you missed $665 million in billings during the 13 months they examined and $55 million each month after that. During all 18 months that PIT was shut down, that works out to about $940 million of missed revenue. Is that figure accurate?
The calculation is correct.
Okay. Dr. McDonald, is $940 million an accurate estimate?
It's accurate based on the methods we use to estimate it, correct?
Ms. Duke, how do you reconcile all that missed revenue with Mr. Del Benny's statement that you collected 100.7% of planned collections through February of 2024?
So what I would say is our team utilized the time when PIT was down to go back over previous claims that had been settled out, in some cases where we did not take advantage of the full legal window to bill third parties that we had available. In some cases, we thought the claims were too old, but legally we have up to 6 years to bill, and a lot of our providers are willing to pay. So we went back over those claims to look for lost opportunity of revenue. Furthermore, we continued to buttress our efforts in our first and third party collections for VA direct care, which is the larger part of the revenue that we collect and utilize.
So again, we get back to this planned collections and not actually opportunity of revenue, in your words, my words, receipts that are actually due. Dr. McDonald, do we know what that void is, okay, what that space is, the difference between this claim that we say we've collected 100.7% of this revenue as opposed to what's actually due?
So as far as we're aware, we haven't seen any of those 400 million claims being assessed and then billed to private insurers yet. But it's our understanding that VA started running data from the program integrity tool for revenue collections for those claims as of July 2024. We haven't assessed that yet, and we haven't seen any actual data on whether claims have gone to private insurers yet for that set of claims.
So, Ms. Duke, do you believe that you will ever be able to collect all the revenue that is actually due?
I believe we will be able to collect what is due to the extent that it was delayed as a result of PIT. I can't commit to 100% of the collection any more than in any year I can. But from a resources perspective, to the extent that we offset our resource request of appropriations based on collection activity, I can commit that we will fully recognize the collections necessary for us to even out across the 2 fiscal years of 24 and 25. We will collect, it will just be delayed.
So we're talking about $940 million, okay? And you're saying that that can be attributed to the PIT shortfall, if you will. And so you're telling me we're going to be able to collect all $940 million?
Yes, I am comfortable that we will realize.
And when do you believe that you'll be able to accomplish that by?
I don't know if it will happen in the next couple of years. It kind of depends on how quickly we're able to ingest the data and our team can turn it around. As the data comes through, we assess whether or not it is billable. I don't know whether the first chunk of data coming through represents more billable claims or non-billable claims.
So
we'll
then
continue to
what we're faced with is this shortfall that we really don't know what it is. It's obligations that are due to the VA, but you don't know when you're going to be able to collect them, and they're sitting in the coffers of the insurance. The vast majority of it is sitting again in the coffers of those insurance companies, and their stockholders are the ones benefiting from that, not our veterans, getting that revenue back into the system to help them. I will yield to Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The VA has responsibility to inform our veterans of why they have a copay. And with that responsibility, I wanted to know, what are you communicating to our veterans in an explanation and educating them on why they owe this copay?
So when we send out the notification of the statement of earning, we include a lot of background information on what it was due to and the dates of service that are associated with it. We also include links a lot of times to all of the services that are available. They can log on and find out more information, appeal for relief at that time, and we share a lot of information that is available.
You also have a responsibility to have it, the information spread for a reasonable amount of time. How much time are you allocating to educate and to tell the veterans on why they actually owe this money?
So when we issue the statements, we communicate very clearly and work with them to have a reasonable amount of time. In the case of delayed billing such as this, we try to reach out ahead of actually issuing the statements to communicate, and then we'll have softer touch for those who have larger requirements.
And what does that window look like? So are you giving them a month in advance notice? So you tell them the month, hey, you owe this money, it's going to be due the following month. What does that time frame look like?
I'll have to follow up, but what I would say is that we're very soft about the due dates, particularly when it comes to a longer bill. It's not like 30 days or we'll be knocking on your door.
I want to understand that VA maintains a 6-year timely filing window for private insurers. Does that same window extend for billing veterans for copays? If not, what do VA policies say about deadlines for collecting debt for our veterans?
So there is no time limit on the veterans' debt, but because we have other abilities to work with them, we will extend a payment plan as far into the future as is necessary.
And I had with the other modernization issues that we've come across, and there's been other instances where veterans might have back payments. Have you guys taken a look at to make sure that the compounding effect is not devastating certain veterans?
We certainly are looking, particularly across VHA, we look at the combined statement for the veterans and have a full understanding of their requirements. And what I would say is we have worked very closely with the veterans, the VEO office, and also with our Office of Mental Health to make sure that when we do reach out and provide these communications, we're doing it in a veteran-centric way.
So is that analysis being done before or after? And the reason why I'm asking about the timeliness of it, is it that the veteran may be home and they get all these bills saying, hey, you have a copay for these past years? There was another glitch that we had and you owe money here again. Or are they gonna just get all these bills and be told that they have all these copays? Or are you analyzing it and in some way saying, well, this veteran may have 3 different copays because of 3 different glitches, and so we're now putting them in a different space so we can work it out individually. So is it before or after?
I would say it's before where we have the combined veteran statement, but I will follow up to make sure that we are looking specifically to ensure that we have a softer touch with those veterans who have significant requirements.
Please do, because my concern, as I keep stressing, is that I want to make sure that our veterans aren't at home feeling overwhelmed, that they're getting all these bills, and it's saying that, hey, we had a mistake, but now you owe us all this money, especially when you're on a fixed income. I would never want anyone to be in that situation.
I would say that's why we are looking into regulatory relief so that we don't even have to reach out in those situations.
Ms. Duke, the Republicans have made some assertions that the delay in the collections for community care bills have contributed to VA's nearly $15 billion shortfall. How does the VA classify those overdue collections, and how would their eventual collection affect this shortfall?
So, put plainly, there is no part of the VHA $12 billion shortfall that is the result of delayed revenue. We did dip into our planned carryover a little bit more than we expected this year to, again, cover requirements because they were delayed payments. But as I said, when we expect to collect fully next year, we did not put that effect in our request for additional resources.
Mr. McDonald, Dr. McDonald, I understand that OIG is performing some oversight on the budget shortfall within both the VHA and VBA. Can you share more about the scope of this project?
Sure, yes. We've started 2 different projects. One is looking at a review to determine the factors and conditions that resulted in VHA's request for nearly $12 billion in supplemental funding for VHA for 2025. And one is to look at the factors and conditions that resulted in VBA's request for nearly $3 billion for 2024. So those are both started and ongoing as of right now.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. Now recognize Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Duke, what's the average amount of time it takes to collect every dollar, for non-connected care after the care is delivered? What's your average?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, I'd like to know, because you just said that it doesn't represent a significant amount of the $12 billion. So you have 6 years to bill, correct?
Correct.
Do insurance companies have a statute of limitations on what they will accept?
So a couple of our insurance companies who we work with, we have contracts that predate the legislative permissiveness to bill for the 6-year period. So in those cases, we've been honoring the contract and working with them to see if we can continue to extend it. But it is not industry standard, but it is appropriate given the way in which we do our billing, because we bill as though it were care provided in our direct care system.
I think you just said that they don't accept your bills.
They accept our bills. They will push back to the extent that there is a contractual disconnect with what is
do they pay the
able by.
bills?
We work with them through our general counsel to seek.
What percentage of the bills do
I'd
they
have to
pay?
get back to you on that.
I really want to know that. That may be something we need to examine legislatively, if it's a significant amount. Dr. McDonald, so in 2022, your office found that VHA did not submit over half of the billable claims before the filing deadline, carrying a huge amount of, how many recommendations did you have on that issue?
We had 3 recommendations from that report from 2022.
How many have closed?
All 3 are still open. We paused assessing the recommendations during the PIT pause because we need the PIT to be up and running for revenue collections to be able to assess VHA's responses to the recommendations.
So when do you expect to start review?
We don't have to wait till all 440 million claims are processed. We expect to be able to start assessing them once we know that revenue operations is billing private insurers. We have to wait till that link is made and see how that's working to see if the recommendations have been implemented.
So you're not doing any review at this time on these 3 open recommendations?
Not right now.
Okay, Ms. Duke, the factors you consider when you estimate medical collections in your budget, what factors do you consider?
So we have an econometric model that looks at historical success in terms of our first and third-party collections, and we look at the amount of care that we expect to deliver in the year, and based on that, we develop an estimate for what we will be able to collect against our
Is that a
anticipated.
subset of PIT?
The PIT is the way in which we gather the data to issue the bills, but based on what we've billed through PIT in the past is how we make the projections that we use in our budget formulation.
So you budgeted for the coming, or the fiscal year we're in, $4.4 billion, right?
Correct.
What do you expect to collect?
I would say we actually expect to collect more than that because we will work our way through the delayed collections from 2024 and utilize overtime and contract and hopefully some more staff to work more quickly through revenue than what we had originally expected.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Self. Ms. Duke, I'm going to attempt to get to the bottom of the delayed medical collections and your budget shortfall. I continue to hear this information that one doesn't impact the other, but I don't see how in the world that can be. First of all, how much are the medical collections that are delayed from fiscal year 24 to 25?
How much is the delay?
What is the value
So we
of
don't,
those collections that have not been, that you're projecting that are not going to be collected from 24 to 25?
so we have provided additional resources to the field out of our carryover to offset what they perceived as lost collections, but we actually are on target to come close to our collections goal for the year.
So you initially told us $700 million in July. Would you like to revise that number?
That is the impact of the PIT delay. At the same time that the PIT was delaying first and third party collections in the community care world, we have been utilizing our ability to try to maximize and increase collections from the direct care system.
Okay, so you've been trying through the direct care system. So you initially told us that number was going to be $700 million. Would you like to revise that number?
That is the estimate of what was not collected as a result of PIT being down. I would say that is not the total difference from our expected returns and our collections activity for the year.
So would you like to revise that number?
What I would say is that on average, monthly collections within the VA are between $300 and $400 million. Not necessarily during the PIT, but the Change Healthcare did cause us to reduce monthly collections to right around $150 million, and now we are actually above that $400 million moving forward for what we expect to receive for the remainder of the fiscal year.
So again, that's all great, fine and good, but how does that impact that $700 million? Is that still your target? Do you think that is still going to be the shortfall? Do you think it's going to be more than that? Do you think it's going to be less than that?
So what I would say is, and I apologize for the confusion, collections is a time mushy kind of world where
I
we
understand,
issue the
again,
bill.
because this is where we continue to have this conversation about what is actually obligated to the VA and what you are targeting that you think reasonably you can collect. There's no really any other business in the world that functions that way. You either have receipts due and you are going to be able to collect them, or you are not going to be able to collect them. And to come into this room and say, we are collecting 100% of what our projection is, you can make that projection number whatever you choose to. That is very disingenuous and dishonest to the committee. Mr. Del Benny, you can roll your eyes and make faces, but you can make that projected number anything that you choose to. You have obligations. And so what we are trying to determine is how this is all impacting
If I
the
may.
budget. No, you can't. I'm moving on. Ms. Duke, when I asked Dr. Elnahal about this issue last week, he characterized it not as a budgetary issue, but more of a cash flow issue.
That's correct.
Well, it's correct, but there's revenue that is due, and if it's not being collected by the VA, then that has a direct impact on your budget. He also said, ultimately, the cash in the bank account is lower than we had hoped and expected because of the collection issues between Pitt and the Change Healthcare incident. Ms. Duke, basic question. Are you requesting supplemental appropriations to make up for these delayed collections?
No, we are not.
So if we have this additional revenue then, and I've got a statement here that you all just provided yesterday, and nowhere in there does it reflect that. It doesn't show the shortfall, nor does it show the revenue that you're anticipating to collect. So where is that silo? Where is that account being managed? And it's basically, from my standpoint, because it's not reflected in here, it's being utilized as some kind of a slush fund. Whatever you get, you can redirect. Whatever you don't get, you don't have to claim. And meanwhile, you've made your budget request on these forms, not reflecting all of the information about what your income and what your obligations are.
The president's budget for 2025 was transparent about the fact that we expected to have significant carryover, both in base and TEF resources, from 24 into 25 to offset our expected requirements in.
Did you have that revenue carryover?
So that is where we see the impact of the PIT tool. We expect that we will carry over less than what we had expected from 24 into 25. We did not increase our request for additional resources because we expect to make up that lost carryover via collection activity in 2025, and that is the cash flow that Dr. Elnahal was referencing.
Again, it's not reflected in those numbers. The revenue nor the obligation is not being reflected in the statement. So as far as I can tell from my standpoint, this is a mystery account that you are not accounting for. I will now yield time to Sheriff McCormick to ask questions.
Assistant Secretary Del Benning, did you have any comments that you wanted to make?
Thank you very much. The only thing I wanted to clarify is the projection of collections, which I had in my opening speech, which also Laura Duke referred to, would have been projected ahead of time. So there's no kind of moving that number to what fits our fancy. That projection was made at the beginning of the year, and we achieved that number. Thank you for letting me clarify that.
Thank you. And Ms. Duke, did you have anything you wanted to state?
I'll just note that the estimate of collections is what we provide so that when we request resources in the president's budget, we don't double dip. We want to be clear regarding what we need from Congress to provide care to veterans, and we reduce that amount by what we expect to collect. Sometimes we collect more, sometimes we collect less, but that is intended to help you do your job in terms of providing appropriations to us in our need.
Thank you. In our accountability hearing last week, Inspector General Missal aptly discussed the challenges that IG faces in conducting oversight of certain elements of the community care, like wait times and quality of care. As I understand it, VHA's Office of Integrity and Compliance utilizes data from the PIT to support investigations performed by OIC and DOJ and provide necessary oversight of community care claims. Dr. Davis Bradley, while the PIT has been down, how have you been able to support the work of detecting fraud, waste, and abuse in community care claims?
We've had a lot of opportunity to look up into the upstream payment systems. And so as soon as it became clear that the program integrity tool was not going to be coming online as quickly as we had hoped, we started kind of building data queries, data pulls, to look into the upstream payment systems to do the same types of analytics that we've always done, looking pre and post-payment to identify potentially fraudulent, wasteful, or abusive billing or payment.
There's been some indication that VA may not continue to utilize PIT for fraud, waste, and abuse detection efforts. Is that true?
So we are trying, and we've had lots of conversations with CMS over the past year to better identify kind of what they are doing. They are about 5 years more mature than we are in some of our processes, and so what we're trying to do is learn from other federal agencies to make sure that we have the best system and processes in place to ensure that we're detecting the most amount of fraud, waste, and abuse.
Dr. Miss McDonald, how has the data you've received from these upstream systems been sufficient for your oversight efforts?
We haven't received any data from the upstream systems that are being used.
How could VA and these third-party administrators improve their systems and reports for detecting fraud, waste, and abuse until PIT is able to be fully functional again?
So it's my understanding that different uses were implemented, like the upstream systems, but I am not familiar with the specifics. I think Dr. Davis Bradley would probably be better able to talk about the specifics there.
And what information would you need? What data would you need so you can conduct sufficient oversight?
So I think for us, what was lost with the program integrity tool being offline was really for the fraud, waste, and abuse side for our investigators, because that was a repository where claims data, paid claims data, came in from multiple different systems. They were able to use it for data analytics to look at fraudulent provider behavior and to look across programs, and then they were also able to use it as a data source for their investigations to bring to trial. And without that, they've had to use other data sources that have taken more time and more effort for them to get the other data from the other sources. So that's been a loss for them while it's been offline.
Mr. Del Benning, in a March briefing, VA spoke to the need to establish a long-term roadmap and modernization plan for the community care revenue pipeline. What progress has VA made in developing this roadmap and plan?
At this point, we've been focused on the repair of the pit, and so I would say we've only had conversations about what the requirements are from the various stakeholders, which would be VHA and revenue operations and Office of Integrity, but we haven't got to the point where we've actually plotted a way forward. Then the next step, and the thing that we're deeply engaged in right now, in addition to getting it fully loaded with data for revenue operations, is putting back the fraud, waste, and abuse algorithms or reports more accurately that ran on top. So that's the focus right now.
Thank you. I yield back.
If I may, just for 1 second, let me pass it just for, I know we only have a few seconds, but to Cherry to see if she had some additional things she would comment on in terms of efforts on the pipeline.
Thank you very much. So what I will say is that we are focused heavily on looking at an end-to-end picture of the community care system as well as the revenue operations as part of the overall restoration. We're working with members of both Dr. Bradley's team and Ms. Duke's team to understand the best possible sources that we can provide and how to not only restore the functionality of PIT, but build a future system that will be better for all of their needs. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Duke, given your exchange with the chairman, how much do you need to undershoot your projections before you do ask for supplemental help?
So what I would say is this year, given where we were seeing the number of veterans coming in for care post-PACT Act, and given the increasing demands both in the community and in the direct care system, looking at how we were executing this fiscal year, that was when my leadership made the decision to come forward and communicate the need for additional resources to continue delivering care at that pace.
Okay, so I believe that the White House requested the $12 billion in the Toxic Exposure Fund. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To close the shortfall. Do you believe that anyone in VA has adequately explained the shortfall?
I would defer to you on whether or not we could provide additional information.
Do you think you've done adequately explain the shortfall today?
We are always ready to answer additional questions.
Now, reminding you that you're under oath, the Toxic Exposure Fund was created to pay for costs under the PACT Act. Is every dollar in your supplemental request a result of the PACT Act?
The Toxic Exposure Fund authorizes resources to care for veterans who with toxic exposure, whether or not those veterans are eligible for care as a result of the PACT Act. And I can commit to utilizing the full $12 billion request for the care of veterans with toxic exposures in 2025.
Because, you know, there's been some concern on this committee that the fund has been improperly used in some cases. So I appreciate your assurance, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Self. Ms. Duke, you indicated in July that the VHA is requesting $2.65 billion in the supplemental appropriations to make up for funds that you had planned to carry over unspent from fiscal year 24 to 25. You provided a breakdown of the shortfall yesterday, and it doesn't seem to include that at all. Are you still requesting supplemental appropriations to make up for the planned carryover that is no longer available?
Yes, we are, Congressman. If you look at the difference between the budget and the revised estimate, the fact that we anticipate obligating more funds in 24 than what the budget had projected, that difference is where we will dip into the carryover, so to speak.
How do the delayed medical collections relate to the unspent carryover?
So the unspent carryover will be lower than what was expected, but we deducted that impact due to collections in the supplemental request because, as I said, we expect to collect in 25. We are only requesting additional resources for the early spend carryover that is not due to collections, that is due to operations, delivering additional care in the community and in the direct care system.
You're not, again, so we're not accounting for that shortfall at all?
In our request, no, we are not, because as I said, we'll expect to collect it fully in 2025.
Okay, so if those collections do not take place, okay, what do we do then?
Well, in that case, we would look for additional efficiencies and implement some of the activities that we articulated would be necessary if we don't receive the $12 billion.
So we're going to take resources from other areas around the VA. Again, this goes directly to my argument. We're going to go and remove resources from other areas of the VA that should be delivering these services to our veterans to make up for the shortfall for the insurance companies that we're supposed to be collecting from.
We do not anticipate that that will be necessary because, as mentioned, we already have the data feed and we are working our way through the backlog caused by PIT, and we anticipate being able to resume and meet our collections target by the end of fiscal year 25.
But previously, you just stated to me that it could take several years before you actually catch up to the amount of revenue that is due, that's obligated to the VA. Did you not?
We have available 6 years. That does not mean it will take 6 years to recoup.
I understand, but your statement was it could take us several years to catch up on these collections. Those are your words.
Yes.
So during that time period then, we're going to be,
We will
again, in your words, directing resources from other areas of the VA in order to take up for the shortfalls that we do. Or you'll be coming back to this body and requesting another supplemental.
Or we will meet our collections targets via other means as we've done throughout the fiscal year while PIT has been down.
Your targets, but that's not, again, we've already had this conversation. Your targets are a far cry difference than what is the actual obligation to the VA. And so we still get back to the same issue, and that is we have all of these due receipts. The vast majority is from insurance companies, and instead of having these collections and getting this revenue back into VA to help to deliver our benefits You yourself, in your own words, said we will have to direct other resources from other portions of the VA to make up for that shortfall, because your shortfall is not reflected in this statement that you just provided for this committee yesterday. Those are your statements.
The budgeted expected returns is what we identify as necessary to meet veterans' needs in '25. If we successfully collect that, as we believe
If
we will.
we successfully collect that.
That's true in any fiscal year, sir.
Yeah, okay. All right. It looks as if I have no one here to continue questioning with me, so we are going to wrap this up. Where's my... Okay, there we go. That's it. I want to thank the witnesses for joining us today. I think we have been able to bring some of this information forward to show that we still have major collection problems. I just don't know how else we can describe it. I would urge my colleagues in both parties, in the House as well as the Senate, to give every element of the VA's budget shortfall the attention and scrutiny that it deserves, because we are not getting that information. We looked at just two aspects today and found answers to many of the questions, but also discovered many others. We're all focused on ensuring that our veterans receive the care and benefits that they've earned. But we also know that VA struggles with budgeting and management have existed for many years and will not be resolved overnight. I, for one, don't believe this is the last shortfall that the VA will find in itself, or the last supplemental appropriation that Congress will be asked to provide. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material, and without objection, so ordered, this hearing is adjourned.